Ford can't sell any more of these full-size $100,000 trucks, with Platinum F350s costing as much as $124,000. With beautiful XLTs like this outfitted in 4x4 are also going for as much as $74,000. And these gorgeous Tremors, you'll notice they have the all-terrain rubber, the beautiful decals here, steel stepping guards right here, painted handles, beautiful rims. They even have the rear slider in here. And in many cases, you get the split rear tailgate. They're absolutely gorgeous trucks, especially you get the dual exhaust tips, these extra tow hooks, and as well a big tow capacity on a lot of these Tremor trucks. Of course, these are absolutely beautiful units. The interior is chock full of leather, heated, cooled, and all the tech. But all of this goodness here comes at a cost. And that's as much as $97,000 plus taxes. By the time you throw the extras like floor mats, PPF, as well as taxes, you're well over $100,000 for an F-150. Things are getting pricey, and yet these trucks are selling. They can't keep them in stock. And while many critics say that Ford is running out of time and the bubble is bursting and they can't sell vehicles, there is a strong reality. The numbers don't lie. And when you look at statistics, Ford has led the sales as much as almost 500,000 units sold. They led GM almost collectively between GM and Chevy. They've sold just about as many trucks. And while you're seeing a lot of inventory hitting the lots, we know Ford is racing against the clock to try to beat a date coming up very soon. Because in the first half of 2025, Ford has been selling trucks left, right, and center. One of their most popular trucks that are selling happens to be the Expedition. They literally can't sell them anymore because they have none to sell. Those are one of the hottest ticket items, and for well over 6 figures, it's actually quite shocking to hear that people are buying those at those price points, but they are. On top of it, EV sales are off the charts as well, and people are trying to beat the deadline because of what's about to happen. And sure, while sales on vehicles like the little junior Bronco here, we have the regular Bronco, the Sport. As you'll notice, this is just the baby version. These are still selling. They're not quite as hot as the full-size trucks. It seems to be a real hot pickup truck market these days, and these vehicles in their various formats are selling, but they're essentially a reskinned Ford Escape like you're looking at over there. And while some people love these, they have to have them, most people know that the full-size Broncos are really the vehicle to have. And here we are at a $42,000 price tag. These aren't cheap either. And during the crunch a couple of years ago, the only trucks that Ford was really able to successfully sell were the Maverick. The Maverick was an easy, cost-effective little vehicle for buyers to get their hands on. I mean, here we have a great little Maverick. We look down here, this is an XLT. Even the XLT gives you basic plastic, no sunroof on top, and even inside, it's a very basic setup. You do get the center screen in there, but a lot of people were buying these in the XLT format. These don't come at a cheap price tag, unfortunately. You get basically highway rubber, pretty standard front grille setup on these vehicles, but people are still buying them because they were looking for something a little bit more cost effective than some of the full-size trucks like over there. But these ones here also were priced around $44,000 for an XLT, meaning that to get your hands on one of these little Mavericks was not going to be all that affordable either for people on a limited budget. And here's an example of one of the best sellers recently for Ford. One would think, who has the money for these full-size $100,000 SUVs? Here we have an Expedition Max right there, and you'll notice you have great rims, you got the full-size back cabin, you've got massive space, and it's essentially built on a full-size truck platform. And for hundreds of thousands of dollars, people are still buying these. And even though it only represents about 10-12% of Ford's total portfolio, the profit margin is enough to ensure that Ford's making up enough of profit on the sales of each and every one of these. Because this Platinum Ford Expedition, you know, they have the great flip away mirrors, lots of space, roof rack, of course, here, but they also come at a price tag that's not insignificant at $117,000. That's Canadian funds, of course. That's not a cheap proposition. You start throwing on your taxes and the extras, throw on little fats under there and put a little paint protection film, which you needed with all the rocks and the gravel on the road in these jurisdictions, you're definitely going to find yourself walking out the door spending in that neighborhood of $125,000, $130,000. And then in Canada, you're talking about the luxury fee as well, the luxury tax. Now, Ford's had some major success as well with electric vehicles. They've actually seen a spike in August by about as much as 19% increase in sales. Now they're actually down overall by about 5 or 6% year over year. But it's quite clear that buyers are trying to get out there, hustle, and quickly buy some of those electric vehicles. Mustang Mach-E or the Ford F-150 Lightning are some classic examples. Even some of their plug-in hybrids are popular. Anything that has extra electrification seems to benefit currently by some of these federal incentives. Now, while every manufacturer sees the tariffs as a potential for a risk for a cost adder to the manufacturing and distribution and production of a lot of their vehicles, particularly when you're talking about supply chain. Of course, parts are costing extra if they're coming from out of country. They're coming, whether even the vehicle's manufactured in Mexico or Canada, that could potentially add some extra costs. And Ford's realizing that, but they're making it up on the sale of a lot of their full-size trucks. So where they're losing on some of the tariffs, they're certainly making up on profit margin because some of their full-size trucks, including the full-size Bronco, F-150, and the Expedition, are some of those vehicles that are selling like hotcakes. Now, Ford sales have absolutely soared in the month of August. Clearly, the majority of that comes from the electric vehicles. What's going to happen when those incentives dry up? Well, what you're going to see is a continuation of the high profit margin. The numbers won't necessarily be there, but as we see the profit margins coming from full-size trucks and the Expedition, which is another popular vehicle, are actually going to make up for a lot of those thin profit margin type vehicles. Vehicles like this maybe don't have as much margin. It's more of a volume car, volume SUV. Those are still selling. They're still popular and they're still moving. But Ford relies on their full-size trucks to actually make the real money. And while Ford seemed to be struggling last year, as every manufacturer was, and a lot of that had to do with a lot of factors, including job loss, cost of these $100,000 trucks, that seems to be a barrier that very few people are worried about these days as banks continue to enable the purchasing of these $100,000 trucks. And as banks start loosening the wallets and actually loosen up the purse strings, more people are going out there and buying these full-size trucks. But Ford's found a lot of success with a lot of their vehicles, their fleets. Like here we have one that's clearly outfitted to be a police vehicle here. You've got all the lights, you see all the lights up front. You definitely have this light right up here that's installed factory, of course. You definitely have the basic outfit. They're not worried about dressing these up. They're not fully loaded with leather interior, but you can see you've got the police lights back there, and they give you the EcoBoost with the 4-wheel drive system. Yeah, you get basic wheels, but half the time these vehicles are getting curbed and bumped around, and unfortunately, they don't get to treated with the most respect, but they will work. Oh, look inside there. There's even a bit of a post of some sort. But fleet vehicles, whether it's rentals or whether it's for police forces or some other jurisdictional requirements, those are hot topics, as are a lot of the commercial vehicles. We see the Transits are also doing very, very well. This is a commercial division. And we've already said that Ford's done very well in the last few years with the Blue Oval, but most specifically with their commercial division. We have the full-size vans like this, where people constantly need this. They need these vehicles for their work to get the job done. If you're electrical, plumbing, gas fitting, whatever, if you're running a business, many people rely on vehicles like the Transit, and these just always will have a space. And you know what? With relatively low trim levels, it's an easy vehicle to outfit. It's affordable for commercial operations, but most importantly, Ford relies on the commercial division, one of his biggest earners as well, the full-size Super Duties, other trucks that a lot of people are buying. And again, maybe not so much in the dressed up format like these ones here. We're an FX4 off-road. These are beautiful vehicles. This is an F350. It's essentially a one-ton truck. And naturally, some of these come with the diesel, the 6.7. And for $120,000, wow, that's not cheap. But when you're running a business, you can write off a lot of those expenses. They still sell. And then you have one of the most expensive trucks in their fleet. We have a King Ranch Super Duty. These are not inexpensive trucks. They are nice though. FX4, you get the nice rims on there. Step guards here as well. And you'll notice you get rear sliders. You could certainly use a spray and box liner in these vehicles. But most importantly, look at this nice two-tone paint on these. You get the diesel engine. It's also an F350 King Ranch. Lots of decals or decals on there. Beautiful front end on these trucks. But how much are these? Well, let's take a look, shall we? Super Duty, lots of options there. Lots of options all the way along. And a grand total of $124,000. Out the door, you're $145,000. Where Ford said they were losing money on the sale of every electric vehicle, and they've been selling them at an alarming rate. The vast majority of those cost savings or losses are made up by the sales of a lot of their commercial vehicles, like these. Here's a 350, 450, 550s. A lot of these, they need service bodies. Of course, they're diesel operated. This one's a 550. So it means it's probably going to have a utility wagon on the back. This is essentially a commercial vehicle. As I've already said, a lot of the Transits, A lot of the fleet vehicles, those are all some big sellers with large and sizable profit margins for Ford. And Ford continues to have a very successful year in 2025 as they start to emerge as one of the top sellers in the big three. But throughout all the fluctuations in the market, Ram, they're not selling too many trucks, neither are Toyota. The fact remains is it really boils down to Ford as well as what you're seeing from GM, GMC, and Chevy. But when things get low, Ford introduces employee pricing, which they've done, and that's been all year like that, and that's been a big reason why they've managed to continue selling a lot of these full-size trucks. Heavy incentives, banks that are enabling it, and they're getting looser with the purse strings, means a lot of people are now able to get into their new dream truck. And the Expeditions have been a hot seller. So has the Maverick. They've been hot sellers. And even the little Ranger has also been a truck that's been selling significantly well as well. So initially sales were very poor for the electrified vehicles, but they're coming up. And the Mustangs aren't selling that well either, but it's just enough to fill in that niche space for the brand. Suffice it to say, Ford continues to offer incentives between the federal incentives for electrification, between Ford's incentives as well for employee pricing discounts, and on top of the fact that banks are now allowing it to all happen, and longer loan terms means that everybody can get into their new vehicle. Hence, Ford sales continue to rise. And these vehicles can't be found anywhere, therefore they're hard to sell if you don't have one on the lot.